In this session of the Harmony of Religions, we will survey the ancient mystery schools, including the sacred teachings and practices of Egypt, Greece, and Rome, such as the Eleusinian initiation rites, the Orphic movement, the teachings of Pythagoras, and others. We will connect the myths and ceremonies of early agriculture to philosophical systems intended for personal transformation, spiritual knowledge, and integration with cosmic harmony and order. We will see evidence for a Western esoteric tradition intended to teach the secret of immortality, including a modern revival in Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and Theosophy. We will conclude with a thick description of an ideal type for a club for mystics based on Vedanta as preached by Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, and as established in the College of Prayer founded by Aldous, Huxley, and Gerald. Swami Vivekananda said, "The first questions that arose in the human soul were about the external world. The solution of the mystery was asked of the sky, of the stars, of the heavenly bodies, of the earth, of the rivers, of the mountains, of the ocean. And in all ancient religions, we find traces of how the groping human mind at first caught at everything external. There was a river god, a sky god, a cloud god, a rain god, everything external, all of which we now call the powers of nature, became metamorphosed, transfigured into wills, into gods, into heavenly messengers. But as time passed, these external answers proved insufficient. The inquiry turned inward, and humanity began to grapple with the greatest mystery of all, the nature of the self. Swami Vivekananda said, "Of the many riddles that have perplexed the intellect of man in all climes and times, the most intricate is himself. Of the myriad mysteries that have called forth his energies to struggle for solution from the very dawn of history, the most mysterious is his own nature. It is at once the most insoluble enigma and the problem of all problems. As the starting point and the repository of all we know and feel and do, there has never been, nor will be, a time when man's own nature will cease to demand his best and foremost attention. After long searches here and there, in temples and in churches, in earths and in heavens, at last you come back, completing the circle from where you started, to your own soul, and find that he for whom you have been seeking all over the world, for whom you have been weeping and praying in churches and temples, on whom you were looking as the mystery of all mysteries shrouded in the clouds, is nearest of the near, is your own self, the reality of your life, body, and soul. That is your nature. Assert it, manifest it." The word mystery comes from the ancient Greek mystikos, meaning hidden or private. It shares roots with myo, which means to initiate, and mysterion, meaning secret teaching. A mystery in this context involves something understood only by those prepared to receive it. Initiates in the ancient schools were called mystis, those who entered in silence to uncover invisible truth. The concept of mystery is also tied to the esoteric, where knowledge is concealed not to withhold power, but to protect its transformative potential. It also connects to gnosis, direct, intuitive knowledge of the divine. Mysteries are not merely enigmatic puzzles to be solved through logical explanations, but experiences guiding seekers beyond surface appearances to life-changing spiritual realization. We will see how initiation, silence, and sacred knowledge were key to the path of self-discovery and cosmic harmony. The ancient mysteries have always provoked both reverence and restrictions. Michael Barkin refers to stigmatized knowledge, wisdom that is rejected, suppressed, or ignored because it challenges norms. Jeffrey Kripal identifies 5 categories of the unspeakable. Secrets may be too profound, complex, or unconventional for public discourse. Taboos reflect societal pressures toward conformity, while concealment often masks truth in symbolic form. Intimate knowledge requires discretion, and ineffability points to the limits of language. Some facts can only be experienced directly. The teachings of ancient mystery schools were often encoded in myth and ritual, and transformative initiation required not merely an intellectual comprehension, but personal intuition and insights. According to 33rd degree Freemason Manly P. Hall, in attempting to organize the God idea, it was necessary to clothe it in familiar attributes. As time passed, deity was regarded as a personality subjected to all the limitations imposed by interpretation. With the world as the theater of divine manifestation, humanity could ascend through disciplines of spiritual development and stimulation of latent faculties of the soul according to the laws governing such processes in nature. Systems of initiation and institutions flourished for thousands of years that enabled the creature to know the creator, the noblest purpose of the species. The adept concept, as it is held today in various parts of the world, is essentially Brahminical, and those students seeking additional data should consult the Upanishads and the religious literature concerning the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. In the Vedic tradition, the Rishi Yajnavalkya delays answering a question about the doctrine of karma, or the law of cause and effect, and the secret of immortality and mystery of eternal life. He says, "Give me your hand. We shall talk privately. This topic cannot be discussed in public." The ineffability, complexity, and nuance of the mystery of death and rebirth is echoed in the Bhagavad Gita, or the Song of God. Krishna says to Arjuna, "Even teachers are confused. Thus I shall explain to you that you may know and be freed from suffering. This doctrine is difficult to comprehend." Similarly, the Katha Upanishad features the story of Nachiketa, who meets Yama, the god of death, after his father cursed him. Yama hesitates when asked to disclose the nature of the soul and the law of rebirth. He warns, "Even the gods in the ancient days had doubts because this subtle doctrine is difficult to comprehend." After explaining the difference between the good and the pleasant in the quest for truth and knowledge of God, he finally says, "A mortal ripens like corn, and like corn is born again." This pithy statement signifies the cyclical nature of life and death, where just as a cornstalk grows, reaches maturity, and then produces new seeds to start the cycle again, so too does a human life reach its peak and then end, only to be reborn in a new form, representing the concept of reincarnation and eternal life. This simile repeats in variations throughout the ancient mystery schools. The myth of green-skinned Osiris is central to Egyptian religious customs and the ancient mystery of death and rebirth. Osiris, born of earth and sky, introduced agriculture and law, bringing civilization to Egypt and the wider world. Betrayed by his brother, he was dismembered and scattered. His wife, Isis, the personification of nature, recovered his body, reviving him as the god of the underworld. This act of restoration symbolizes renewal and the promise of life after death. At the beginning of the planting season, Osiris was honored through the use of corn mummies, representative figures filled with seeds, and as the seeds germinated in the cycles of seasons, they exemplified resurrection and the eternal return of life from death. The Eleusinian mysteries were among the most venerable initiation rites of ancient Greece, based on the myth of Persephone and Demeter, who taught mankind how to farm. Persephone's abduction by the lord of the underworld and her return each spring symbolized the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, mirroring the rhythms of nature and human existence. The lesser mysteries, held in the spring, prepared initiates through purification and atonement. Over the following year, candidates with time and money studied the quadrivium, arts and sciences, intended to cultivate intellectual and spiritual insight. In autumn, the greater mysteries reenacted Persephone's descent and return through symbolic rituals, beginning with purification in the sea, animal sacrifices, and a procession to the temple. This transformative journey led to dramatic performances featuring an ear of corn, which revealed hidden truths about the soul's immortality and the harmony of cosmic order. The Dionysian festival commemorated the fertility god whose myth, like that of Persephone, centers on death and rebirth. Dionysus, born of Zeus and mortally destroyed by the Titans, was resurrected by Athena, symbolizing the soul's triumph over dismemberment and chaos. He traveled the world and taught how to cultivate vineyards and orchards. After proving his divinity throughout the world, he rescued his mother Earth from death. His twice-yearly festival began with a procession carrying baskets of bread and jugs of wine. This was followed by songs and dance, a bull sacrifice which was torn to pieces amidst wailing and shouting, and a contest of theatrical performances of tragedies and comedies with prizes to authors such as Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes. And finally, a drunken masquerade which may have included ingestion of an entheogen. The Orphic movement focuses on the divine musician and poet, the son of Apollo and a muse. Orpheus introduced sacred rites and agricultural practices while traveling abroad with a heroic band. His descent into the underworld in a tragic and failed attempt to rescue his wife symbolizes the soul's struggle against mortality and suggests a tension between human love and cosmic law. When he would not seek comfort in the arms of another female, a group of jealous women tore him to pieces. The ascetic Orphics were teachers for a fee who believed that the soul, trapped in the body, undergoes cycles of reincarnation and transmigrates until purified. They taught the divine origins of humanity, born from the ashes of the Titans, and offered secret knowledge for spiritual liberation. Through initiation, the Orphics sought to free the soul into eternal life. The Pythagorean school at Crotona had both monastics and householders. The goal was individual perfection and knowledge of the changeless truth in the world of appearances. The cure for ignorance and confusion required methodical study that revealed the plan and purpose of creation and self-discipline that produced the peace and harmony of integrity. Their day began with a solitary walk among groves and a temple. They avoided crowds so soon after waking from sleep. Their morning conference would include songs, dance, dream interpretation, and a breakfast of honey. This was followed by massage and physical activity, including wrestling, weightlifting, and running. After lunch with guests, small groups would walk and converse on philosophical topics. After a bath and burning frankincense, they ate supper, sang songs, and listened to readings and recitations of precepts for perfection. The day ended with retirement to private study. Pythagoras regarded food, exercise, music, and poetry as medicine. The novitiate was first observed in athletics and social interactions. Humor was considered especially virtuous. Before initiation, there was first a testing in a haunted cave. The beginner was expected to solve a symbolic puzzle, then faced mocking and ridicule in assembly. If these trials were passed successfully, the neophyte was allowed to listen to lessons for 2 to 5 years in absolute silence. No questions, no objections, no discussion. Pythagoras paid worthy students expenses and taught mathematics, geometry, music, and astronomy from behind a curtain. The second step was a monastic life with vegetarian diet and direct teachings on cosmic evolution, the unity of existence, the patterns of eternity, astrological symbolism and correspondences, the interrelation of macrocosm and microcosm, and ethics. This third step of perfection included lessons on esoteric psychology and the immortality of the soul. These teachings were given at night, by the seaside, or in a sanctuary with rituals. In the fourth step, adepts were expected to act in the world with purity in body, virtue in heart, and truth in intellect. When Asclepius, the Greek hero god of healing, was orphaned at birth, he was nurtured by the wise centaur Chiron, who taught him therapeutic arts. Some say that he could revive the dead with an elixir given by Athena. Others say he found the herb of immortality in the mouth of a snake. The hilltop sanctuary of Asclepius was surrounded by a wide grove. The sick and wounded could bathe in hot and cold springs, swim in the ocean, exercise in the gymnasium, walk with philosophers in the garden, relax with a massage, or enjoy music, poetry recitals, and dance performances in the theater. Guests stayed in a dormitory that included fine dining. Priests in the temple could fix broken bones, heal infected cuts and sores, alleviate pain with plants and roots, and remedy other ailments. They were best known for dream interpretation. Dreams and hallucinatory visions were reported to the priests, whose analysis formed a prescription for treatment. The entrant was required to fast, burn incense, and ritually offer a cock. After ingesting an entheogen, the patient would enter a labyrinth, leading to a restricted area to sleep with non-poisonous snakes. This incubation would often produce an instant cure. No fee was required, though those who had the means were expected to support the temple. The Therapeuti were ascetic servants of God with superior healing arts. The term was also applied to the followers of Asclepius and worshippers of the Ptolemaic adaptation of Osirian rites. These philosopher priests were contemplative monks who could be met and existed in many places in the inhabited world. They would pray, garden, study literature, perform music, and stargaze. Some scholars translate their name as sons of the Buddhist elders. In the Mithraic initiation, a Roman adaptation of Zoroastrianism, a white bull is sacrificed for a ceremonial feast in an underground vault to consecrate the hidden lord of the tree of truth. The esoteric rites among those united by the handshake were conducted in 7 steps. First, nurturing compassion. Second, a secret rebirth with occult powers. Third, discipline and courage. Fourth, strength and wisdom. Fifth, nobility. Sixth, illumination. And 7, perfection. In early Christianity, some doctrines were veiled from outsiders, shared only with initiates during rituals like baptism or the Eucharist. This secrecy reflected the belief that sacred truth required preparation to be fully understood, a principle carried forward into medieval liturgical dramas. Guilds staged mystery plays to dramatize biblical narratives, miracle plays to recount saints' lives, and morality plays to personify virtues and vices and allegorical struggles, exploring themes of redemption and spiritual perseverance. These performances educated and inspired, transforming abstract theology into relatable human experiences. Interpretive methods deepened this significance. The literal meaning conveyed relatable stories, while allegory unveiled ineffable truth. The tropological method taught ethical lessons, and the anagogical revealed transcendent facts, often through poetic devices like metaphor and personification. This approach linked Christian drama to earlier mystery traditions, where ritual, symbol, and story guided seekers toward spiritual realization and cosmic harmony. Freemasonry emerged from the medieval guild system and gives lessons in character transformation, civic duty, and classical philosophy reconciled with theology in an exhaustive account of symbolism and religious myth. God makes visible to men his will in events, an obscure text written in a mysterious language. Men make their translations of it forthwith hasty, incorrect, full of faults, omissions, and misreadings. To study and seek to interpret correctly the symbols of the universe is the work of the sage and philosopher. It is to decipher the writing of God and penetrate into his thoughts. Masonry, successor of the mysteries, still follows the ancient manner of teaching. Her symbols are the instruction she gives. The lectures are endeavors, often partial and one-sided, to interpret these symbols. He who would become an accomplished Mason must not be content merely to hear or even to understand the lectures. He must, aided by them, and they having, as it were, marked out the way for him, study, interpret, and develop these symbols for himself. All religious expression is symbolism. The earliest instruments of education were symbols, and they and all other religious forms differed and still differ according to external circumstances and imagery, and according to differences of knowledge and mental cultivation. We hold that God has so ordered matters in this beautiful and harmonious but mysteriously governed universe, that one great mind after another will arise from time to time, as such are needed, to reveal to men the truths that are wanted and the amount of truth that can be borne. The Mason believes that God has arranged this glorious but perplexing world with a purpose and on a plan. Initiation does not change. We find it again and again, and always the same through all the ages. The first trial of Masonic initiation in truth, wisdom, and light is solitary confinement in a dark room. The blindfolded newcomer is seated at a small table. The walls are marked with the four elements, the four seasons, and gloomy emblems. A skeleton with a banner inscribed with vitriol, Visita interiorum terra rectificando in Viennes occultum lapide, which translates, enter the cave with virtue and you will find the hidden philosopher's stone. Other emblems include a cock painted above a flag advising vigilance and perseverance. See the light. There are other warnings. If you care about human distinction, go away. If your curiosity brings you here, leave. If you are afraid, renounce. At the table, there is a candle indicative of the soul's weak light. A skull and hourglass are reminders of mortality. The inkstand represents mineral existence, ink from the vegetable kingdom, and goose feather pen from the animal realm. Before the recruit is accepted, he must answer three questions. What are your duties to God? What are your duties to yourself? What are your duties to humanity? The final direction is to complete a last will. Then, with a ring of the bell, the candidate proceeds from the womb of rebirth to the next trial. Initiation is both a personal journey and a collective enterprise, where seekers embark on an adventure in friendship united by a common purpose, to serve humanity and foster cosmic evolution. This informal honor society is not confined to a place or time. Instead, it lives through the conversations and commitments of those who explore the inner nature of humanity and the surrounding cosmos. By preserving and transmitting ancient wisdom, hidden in scattered text and veiled traditions, the order's purpose is liberation. Freedom from ignorance, superstition, and fear. Transformation of selfishness into mature character and creative idealism is achieved through fellowship and right guidance. The path unfolds in three stages. The student demonstrates courage and prepares through study, purification, and trials, often facing tests of sincerity and adversity. The disciple, apprenticed to a teaching lineage, practices humility, silence, and service, often in concealed and imaginative ways. Finally, the master transcends the sorrows and uncertainties of human experience. In the early 17th century, the Rosicrucian manifestos proposed a bold vision, a universal reformation of mankind based on esoteric truth preserved from antiquity, concealed knowledge and hidden wisdom accessible only to the righteous and virtuous, which offered rare insight into nature, soul, and the spiritual realm. The Rosicrucian vows to heal the sick without requesting payment, respect local customs, meet annually, choose successors, and protect the order's secrets for 100 years were introduced in anonymous texts. Influential thinkers like Michael Meyer traced Rosicrucian origins to the mysteries of Eleusinian, Brahmanism, and Pythagorean teachings, while Robert Flood spoke of a philosophical imperium, veiled yet revealed through symbolic language. The Rosicrucian ideal inspired generations of seekers and social welfare workers. For example, Francis Bacon wrote in New Atlantis about a house of brotherhood in the West, and later movements traced their origins to this optimistic aspiration. Madame Helena P. Blavatsky was a co-founder of the Theosophical Society, which sought to unveil what she termed the accumulated wisdom of the ages, or the ancient and timeless truth that was preserved across generations by an occult fraternity of adept seers and exalted beings who safeguarded humanity's spiritual heritage. She described this tradition as an unbroken chain of knowledge, verified and tested by countless masters over millennia. Blavatsky argued that this secret doctrine was no invention of individuals, but a treasury of insights passed orally and confirmed through the independent visions and rigorous scrutiny of seekers who had perfected their spiritual and psychic capacities. She asserted that these teachings, though often obscured in cryptic symbols and veiled allegories, could be traced in every ancient civilization, from Egypt to India to Greece and beyond. Her work aimed to inform the public about this esoteric philosophy, emphasizing the contributions of great poets, philosophers, and mystics who encoded fragments of the universal truth into the world's literature and religious traditions. At the 1893 World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago, the Theosophical Society showcased its compelling vision of spiritual unity and mystical inquiry through the Theosophical Congress. Founded in 1875, the Society pursued three objectives: to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity beyond distinctions of race, creed, or gender, to study world religions, sciences, and philosophies, and to investigate unexplained laws of nature and the latent powers of humanity. The Congress emphasized Theosophy as both an ancient wisdom tradition and a modern movement. It presented essential concepts, including the cosmic harmony of God, nature, and humanity, and the immortality of the soul through death and rebirth. It also addressed topics such as states of consciousness, initiation, and the pursuit of perfection. The Theosophical Society emerged from the first interfaith assembly of the modern world as a popular movement that was offered immense resources and vast lands to develop along the Pacific coast. Their scheme of civic life included the founding of cities and administrations so that people could live in the most healthful, moral, intellectual, and beautiful conditions. This included founding a school for the revival of the lost mysteries of antiquity. The first outpost to promote the teaching of contemplative science and a spiritual ideal of service to humanity was established at Point Loma in San Diego by the esoteric section of the Theosophical Society. An estate for the torchbearer of truth was also built in the Hollywood Hills. The advent of this enigmatic apocalyptic figure was expected between 1975 and 2025 as the fulfillment of prophecies for the future Buddha and the Christ of the Aquarian Age. Theosophists suggested that this avatar of synthesis would unite the world's religions and utilize a global communication network to guide humanity and inspire international cooperation as a herald of peace, love, and harmony through a period of crisis and time of many troubles. The vague beginnings of organization sought to define the aims of the World Teacher Project, with proposals and propaganda, intimate contact with educational reformers, and actual development of the Earth's resources in a global economy and world banking system. In the Blueprints for a World Revolution, science fiction writer and futurist H.G. Wells suggested that world unity is the inevitable task of a serious minority of religious professionals who sacrifice a self-centered individual and social life for an ideal of education and service. Planetary management, or the competent regulation of the global community's economic life in the collective interest and protection of resources against promiscuous waste, is best done by well-organized groups of the most interested, intelligent, and devoted people, and their activities must be subject to free, open, and watchful criticism with no secret methods, insincere tactics, will-bending bullying, oppression, enslavement, or class antagonism. The author, Gerald Hurd, was inspired by H.G. Wells, who was a personal friend. He founded an open conspiracy club, renamed Cosmopolis, renamed again the H.G. Wells Society, and eventually absorbed into the Federation of Progressive Societies and Individuals. Gerald Hurd had a long cherished dream of establishing pacifist cells that could work out the problems of community and serve as a model for larger social change. He wrote, "I am increasingly convinced that what is needed is not merely a political protest, but another order and way of living. There must be constant and deep charity in personal relationships, and then pacifism in national relationships." Gerald Hurd asserted that community and society fail without a psychological and philosophical basis, because the economics of production and consumption is not enough. He was a sponsoring founder of the Peace Pledge Union, and the writer Aldous Huxley was a thought leader in the movement. They did not focus on practical political action, but instead emphasized individual psychological evolution and mysticism. Gerald Hurd wrote, "The society which does not make and continue to make religious discoveries as radical as its material discoveries must rapidly increase in ill-distributed wealth and power, which will generate increasingly neurosis, ill will, and violence." In 1935, Hurd suggested the formation of elite guardians. He said, "We are compelled to intentionally construct some center which will both receive the feeling of the community and give back that feeling transmuted into thought for action. The community can no longer leave the individual to find by himself the purpose of his life in a series of irrelevant, private, inconsequential affairs, excitements, adventures, and enterprises." Hurd believed that such an elite should not engage directly in political action, but rather operate independently in the capacity of detached visionaries, advisors, and instructors to their respective governments. Hurd and Huxley's attempts to establish pacifist communes and meditation groups would meet with limited success and served largely to frustrate those within the Peace Pledge Union who wished for clear and practical policies for which to oppose war. For Hurd, pacifism was not simply an attempt to avert war, but a means of making our spiritual unity tangible by way of social reorganization. He envisioned the establishment of pacifist communes as small communities in which shared responsibilities would inspire a strong sense of interdependence. In addition to shared labor, Hurd believed that regular group meditation was essential to breaking down the separateness of each individual. He wrote, "Living communally is the attempt to begin at the beginning of right human relation, and so to build up a social order based on cooperation instead of competition, sharing instead of possessing, and service instead of self-seeking." In 1936, Aldous Huxley wrote that he would probably try to collaborate with Gerald Hurd to produce a kind of synthesis, starting from a metaphysical basis and building up through individual and group psychology to politics and economics. Although Huxley was entirely supportive of Hurd's aims and techniques, he was doubtful of his own knowledge and abilities to make a success out of Hurd's ambitious pet project. Gerald Hurd wrote, "The end of evolution is not the creation of bigger and more complicated societies and more elaborate economic structures, but the attainment of a higher and intenser form of consciousness, a consciousness as much above that of the average man today as that is above the animals. It is necessary for us to realize that there does exist such a goal, a new quality of consciousness, as well as a new quality of character and conduct. We have come to our present possession of a human body and a self-conscious mind by a long process of evolution. Though that explanation of life and how we came to be where we are and what we are is now generally accepted, few people push their knowledge any further. That is strange, for if it is interesting and helpful to know where you came from, it is even more interesting and helpful to know where you are going and where you might go if you knew the method and the way. Our whole society is increasingly organized to keep its economy going by creating craving and constantly inflaming it. A sane economic system is only possible by psychological training and discovery of the purpose of life. We must be able to cure our mental distress. Peace with others is the second must. Gerald Hurd describes the difficult and skillful work to heal ignorance, confusion, and suffering. The steps resemble the AA program later promoted by his friend Bill Wilson. First, take responsibility for your life. Ask for help and accept support to cure wrong perception and wrong attention. Second, understand addictions, the cravings of appetite, and the distraction of amusements. Also, understand addictive methods, wrong group suggestion, and compulsory systems with evil psychophysical techniques. Third, understand your history and values. What is your purpose? What does this mean? Fourth, replace maladaptive behaviors, wrong views, and wrong actions. And fifth, replace addictions with healthy habits established through discipline, practice, patience, and perseverance. Gerald Hurd wrote, "A new religion has come into history. That is Western Vedanta. Once anyone realizes that real growth of the spirit can be made, he becomes interested in method. He sees that he need no longer leave his life to accident, nor drift and look to amusement to give life whatever meaning it may have. He sees that he must set about intentional living. He must undertake training. He must coordinate all his activities and his whole way of life along the path which has appeared and toward the goal at which that path aims. This insight or foresight raises a number of questions. How is he to set about his new task? How much of his past life, which was based upon deliberate distraction and amusement, can remain? Many things which are obviously of no particular harm to anyone else have to be put out of the way, not because they are harmful in themselves, but because they take up too much time and attention, when all the time one has and all the attention which one can command is required for the one main purpose which now makes meaning of every moment. First and foremost, philosophy stands for accurate definition of terms, and religion, one used to think, for seeking above all else the presence of God. We must therefore define these words and discover whether or not the procedure they describe leads to or away from the goal of our being. In 1941, Gerald put the larger part of his personal financial resources from his inheritance into building and endowing Trabuco College. It consisted of a large complex of Mediterranean-style buildings situated in the middle of some 300 acres, about 75 miles south of Los Angeles. For the next 5 years, from 1 to 2 dozen revolving students meditated 3 times daily, studied, performed necessary chores, worked in the garden, prepared and ate vegetarian meals, and listened to lectures on religious life by Huxley, and others. This was Hurd's most productive decade of writing, and Huxley wrote the perennial philosophy here. According to the prospectus, Trabuco College encouraged the transformation of character through open-minded inquiry, literary research and personal integration, and experiments with techniques and the application of the most auspicious methods as a daily routine. The founders imagined a self-sustaining center where residents live simply and work in the garden or perform other household duties according to capacity and strength. No fee is required of genuine associates who are envisioned as guests and the school as their headquarters. The college is intended for peaceful lovers of truth and freedom as a place for the study of mysticism, the advancement of arts and science, and other social services. Trabuco College of Prayer is a club for mystics, and a rest center for social welfare workers, also open to maladjusted youth seeking to gain control of themselves and return to an integrated life in the world. Humankind can avert destruction only by a new vision. Prayer is the only way in which our evolution may be continued, and there is no other way. We are making the only possible contribution to salvaging an almost derelict civilization when we work on the uncovering of reality and the bringing of human life into line with that reality. Our goal is to change the focus of consciousness for a new quality of character and conduct. To change the focus of consciousness is difficult and skillful work. According to Franklin Zahn, the first manager of Trabuco College, Aldous Huxley, as co-leader, was mostly an unobtrusive listener. Gerald's talks were mainly on various levels of prayer, and he felt that the popular practice of the presence of God by Brother Lawrence, the monk who could pray while at work in the kitchen, was too advanced for beginners. The training for a life of growth and spirituality was based on the Benedictine rule. It had 3 aspects: a temple, which is the integration of the individual; the farm, which would provide economic subsistence and an ethical relationship with nature; and the school, custodians of learning and culture, preserving and transmitting knowledge. The neophyte requesting full membership must be thoroughly conversant with the group's philosophy, procedure, and objectives, and begin the exercises for development with a personal instructor. The spiritual direction was modeled on the ancient practice of Catholic companionship, in which one person serves as a guide, conversation partner, and co-discerner with another who intentionally seeks to explore and grow in spiritual life, reconnecting to true identity and relationship with others, focused and attentive to the divine will on a path to righteousness. The director, who has an unshockable interest and non-censoring concern, offers affectionate support in non-directive counseling. The director asks facilitating questions and helps the seeker to articulate their unique faith experiences, grasp their implications, and make choices based on interpretive assumptions. Both partners seek to discover the origin, meaning, and purpose of religious experience in leadings or promptings of the Holy Spirit, not limited to the early stages of practices and spontaneous experiences of God, but throughout a lifetime of growth in ethical character and virtue, love, and compassion. Historically, Christian laity created a charismatic form of monastic training, which liberated the seeker from confusion and compulsion through contemplation, self-awareness, and discipline, at a discrete distance from society, but not removed from the world. In Gerald Hurd's plan, beginners would receive 90 days of one-on-one counseling once per week, then 1 year of group exchange for 4 hours per week, then overnight retreats up to 5 days a month, and 3-day ceremonies once per quarter at the solstices and equinoxes. Honesty, gratitude, and trust must be expressed by those in the first stage of training for the sympathy and assistance from those in the further states, whose method is permissiveness and non-intervention. Gerald Hurd maps 3 phases of spiritual evolution: the novice who purges for catharsis, the proficient who is enlightened and free, and the perfect, established and integrated in the vision of God. He writes, "To change the focus of consciousness is difficult and skillful work. It does not happen by accident, nor by simply leaving the mind open." He outlines 3 ranks within a monastic society. First, the learners, who serve the senior monks without rule or direction. Second, the educated, residents with a general discipline and specialization, alternating solitude with group rituals, gardening, and household duties, especially in the dining hall. Third, the doctor proficient, who heals by teaching, a bodhisattva, unrestricted by cloistered vows, the incarnate goodwill and conscience of mankind. He writes, "To grow in love is the only true growth." Aldous Huxley wrote the minimum working hypothesis. There is a Godhead, which is the unmanifest principle of all manifestation. It is simultaneously transcendent and immanent. It is possible for humans to love, know, and become identical to the Godhead. Unity with the Godhead is the final end and purpose of human life. There is a law to obey if this end is to be reached. Aldous Huxley expanded the minimum working hypothesis into 4 fundamental doctrines of the perennial philosophy. The phenomenal world of matter and individualized consciousness, the world of things and animals and men and even gods is the manifestation of a divine ground within which all partial realities have their being, and apart from which they would be non-existent. Human beings are capable not merely of knowing about the divine ground by inference, they can also realize its existence by a direct intuition superior to discursive reasoning. This immediate knowledge unites the knower with that which is known. Man possesses a double nature, a phenomenal ego, and an eternal self, which is the inner man, the spirit, the spark of divinity within the soul. It is possible for a man, if he so desires, to identify himself with the spirit and therefore with the divine ground, which is of the same or like nature with the spirit. Man's life on earth has only one end and purpose: to identify himself with his eternal self, and so come to unitive knowledge of the divine ground. The writer Christopher Isherwood summed up three fundamentals of Vedanta. First, only Brahman is real. That is, God is the only reality. Second, the purpose of human life is to become aware of and absorbed in Brahman. That is, the goal is to know God and become established in the perception of that presence. Third, because we are ignorant and confused, we need a teacher to show us the truth. The truth shall make us free. Gerald Hurd's experiment at Trabuco College after 2 cohorts of residents was discontinued, and in 1949 he turned over the property to the Vedanta Society of Southern California, which subsequently named it the Ramakrishna Monastery. The Vedanta Society teaches respect for different religious traditions, promotes the study of Vedanta, and helps sincere aspirants pursue self-realization. The heroic path requires perfect sincerity, gigantic intellect, and strong will for personal liberation and the welfare of the world. Initiation involves both an introduction to the ideals, practices, and history of the lineage, and also private counseling, personal instruction in meditation and other disciplines, and transmission of spiritual power from an unbroken succession of teachers. Members attend lectures, classes, private talks with the Swamis, and enjoy library privileges and a vote in business meetings. Some welcome newcomers to study groups and meditation centers, giving guided tours of the center and the history of Vedanta in America and in that location, introducing activities, events, reading suggestions, and inviting guests to meet the senior Swami. Some are ritualists who perform the daily temple ceremonies and occasional worship. Those who complete a course of study with sufficient years of practice may lecture, and qualified teachers may give introductory meditation instructions and spiritual consultation. No group constraints allow for exceptional talent to make a unique contribution to the world and influence all sectors of society with spiritual ideals. The Vedanta Society is guided by the Ramakrishna mission, dedicated to public education and social welfare work, freedom of thought and action among different individuals with unique temperaments, with no severe austerities and no process of conversion or homogeneous regimen. Swami Vivekananda suggests that all religions feature a combination of principles, mythology, and ritual. His ideal religion unites science, philosophy, and poetry. He envisioned a college of religious education and spiritual growth with branches in every major city. My idea is for autonomic, independent groups in different places. Let them work on their own account and do the best they can. In 1895, he explicitly rejected institutional procedures and hierarchy among his votaries. Each one is quite independent to teach, quite free to preach whatever he or she likes. Individuality is my motto. I have no ambition beyond training individuals up. I again repeat, I form no sect nor organization. He prescribed this model again in 1896. As to the teaching part, my friends will go over this country from place to place, each one independent, and let them form independent circles. However, he insisted on promoting principles, not personalities. He prioritized meditation, study, altruistic work, and character building. He warned against excessive ceremonialism and severe austerities. Swami Vivekananda said, each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. We take in all that has been in the past, enjoy the light of the present, and open every window of the heart for all that will come in the future. His guru, Sri Ramakrishna, said, find God. That is the only purpose in life. Be illumined.